Husband kicks out black maid from home. But he didn't know she had just inherited a fortune. You never belonged in this world, Amara. Be grateful for everything I gave you. The silence that followed was more violent than the shout. The wine glass in Ethan Walker's hand was still trembling. The guests, all white, well-dressed, with frozen smiles on their faces, looked at each other awkwardly, as if they'd just witnessed something they had no idea how to justify. Amara Sanders stood at the bottom of the stairs in the main room of the house. She wore a simple navy blue dress she had adjusted herself at the seams. Her curly hair was tied up in an elegant bun. Her black skin, dark, radiant, flawless, contrasted with the light marble floors and the coldness of everything around. She had only come downstairs to say one sentence, just one. I just wanted to know why I wasn't invited to the dinner. This is my house too, Ethan. The words came out gently, her voice low and steady. But to Ethan, that was an unforgivable affront. He turned, his face flushed from the wine and wounded ego. Your house? Don't fool yourself, Amara. You're here because I allowed it. Don't mistake charity for partnership. She felt the ground disappear for a second, but she kept her eyes fixed. She knew where this was going. I was your wife, Ethan, not your employee. You made me wash the same dishes I was never allowed to sit at. One of his friends coughed nervously. A woman pretended to check her phone. Ethan laughed, loudly. You're a maid. You just changed uniforms. Or do you really think your poor blood and soft voice put you on the same level as her? He pointed at one of the guests, a blonde woman in a beaded dress. The woman blushed and looked down. Amara felt the air leave her chest, but she didn't back down. The room was warm. The shame burned, but something inside her burned more. She looked around and saw everyone avoiding her gaze. No one stood up for her, not a word. Go upstairs, pack your things. You're not coming back to this house. He said it like giving orders to an assistant. And before she could say anything, he added, and don't you dare say I was cruel. I gave you a roof, food, comfort. I took you out of the slums. Be grateful. A lot of women would love to be in your place. Silence. Then Amara calmly took off her wedding ring. She placed it on the coffee table. Her hand was shaking, but her eyes weren't. You didn't take me out of poverty, Ethan. You kept me trapped in it, just with linen curtains and imported rugs. The difference is, now I'm walking away. She climbed the stairs without rushing, each step as heavy as a drum. Upstairs, she pulled the suitcase that had been packed for weeks, just waiting for courage. She also grabbed a small envelope, hidden between books with old handwriting on the front, for when you finally break free. Even she didn't know what was inside. But she knew it was time to open it. Amara came back down with dignity. She didn't look back. But as she crossed the front door, the cold North Carolina air touched her face. And for the first time in years, she took a deep breath. What? She didn't know yet. Was that forgotten, crumpled letter would change her entire life. The rain started light, almost shy, but soon turned into a heavy, cold veil that seemed to follow Amara's every step. The suitcase dragged behind her. Her light coat wasn't enough anymore. But she didn't stop. She didn't ask for a ride. She didn't cry. The sound of her heels hitting the wet asphalt echoed through the empty sidewalk in Charlotte like a cruel reminder. She no longer had a home. She was a black woman, alone, walking through the high part of the city with a past on her shoulders and a future blank. In the window of a closed restaurant, she saw her own reflection. Big, wet eyes, smudged makeup, curly hair undone by the humidity, her posture still upright, beautiful. Even broken, she was still beautiful. She looked at the envelope she was holding against her chest. The old handwriting still visible, for when you finally break free. But there, under the rain, freedom felt like a bitter joke. After more than an hour of walking, she found a simple inn, with yellowish lights at the entrance and the smell of old wood mixed with disinfectant. The clerk, a middle-aged white man, looked her up and down before saying, "Payment up front. No trouble." She didn't argue. She pulled out the last bills from her purse and handed them over with freezing hands. The room was small, with a thin mattress bed, a wooden chair, and a flickering lamp. But it was a roof, and at that moment, that was enough. She sat on the edge of the bed, untied the scarf from her hair, breathed, and cried, silently, like someone emptying a well. The next morning, she went to the corner market to buy cheap coffee and a sweet bread. On her way out, she accidentally bumped into a woman in a wine-colored suit, dark sunglasses, and firm heels. The woman turned around irritated, but when she saw Amara's face, she froze. "Oh my God, Amara?" It took Amara a few seconds to recognize her, but the voice was unmistakable. "Clara?" Her mouth curled into a smile mixed with shame. Clara Morales, a lawyer, Latina with light brown skin and straight black hair down her shoulders, took off her sunglasses and widened her eyes. "What happened to you? You're like this." "Alone?" Amara tried to smile. "I was kicked out of the house last night." Clara gently held her arm. "Kicked out? What do you mean?" "You and that idiot, you guys." "He threw me out, Clara." "In front of his friends?" "Said I should be grateful for everything he gave me." Clara looked around, furious. "And you're staying at a cheap inn, looking like you haven't slept in weeks?" "No, you're coming with me now." "Clara, I don't want to be a bother ... A bother?" "Amara, your grandmother saved my mother from deportation when I was a kid. Your family." They went to Clara's car, a dark, discreet, clean sedan. The contrast between the comfort of the seat and the previous night made Amara's eyes well up again. "You're going to tell me everything, calmly. And then we're going to sue that bastard. Not for what he took from you, but for what he never saw." In the passenger seat, Amara held the still-sealed envelope. Clara noticed. "What's that?" "A letter from my grandmother. She gave it to me before she died. I never opened it." I felt like the time hadn't come yet. Clara looked closely. "Then maybe. The time is now." Amara looked down, took a deep breath, and started breaking the seal with her fingertips. As she opened the letter, her hands trembled. The paper was yellowed, but the scent was familiar. The smell of home, of history, of everything Ethan. Tried to erase, she read the first line and stopped. Her eyes widened. What was written didn't make sense. Clara ... My grandmother says here ... that my name is in a will. Clara looked at her. "A will? Whose?" Amara looked again. The handwriting was clear. So was the name. Jeremiah Langston. The car slowly braked at a red light. Clara gripped the wheel tightly. "Amara ... do you have any idea who that man is?" Clara's voice didn't sound the same anymore. She was staring straight ahead, her face pale with shock. Amara whispered, "No, but if my grandmother wrote this, then there's something I never knew. Who is Jeremiah Langston? And why is Amara's name in the will of a man she never met?" Amara read the name again, just to be sure she wasn't mistaken. Jeremiah Langston. The letters seemed to weigh down the paper. Clara kept driving, but her expression had completely changed. The lawyer's composure was replaced by a mix of surprise and concern. "Are you sure that's the name, Amara?" She just nodded, still staring at her grandmother's handwriting as if it were a key she never knew existed. "He was someone important, wasn't he?" Clara looked in the rearview mirror and her voice came out lower. Jeremiah Langston wasn't just important. He was one of the biggest private investors in North Carolina, owned real estate, stocks, companies. Extremely wealthy and very private. Amara blinked slowly. But what would he have to do with me? I've never heard that name before. Not even my mother mentioned him. Clara parked in front of her own office building, a dark brick structure with a modest facade. She turned off the engine, turned to Amara, and held her hand firmly. You said your mother never knew who her father was, right? Amara nodded, her heart racing. Maybe ... Your grandmother knew. And never wanted to tell. They went up together to Clara's office, which was decorated with hardcover books, framed quotes from legal texts, and a photo of Amara's grandmother beside Clara's mother. Two women with brown skin and strong gazes, bonded by a friendship that had endured decades and prejudice. Clara picked up the envelope and read the letter carefully. Amara, it says here that Jeremiah contacted your grandmother 2 months before she died, and that he left documents ... a will, but never got a response. Your grandmother was very sick. Maybe she kept it hidden to protect you. Protect me from what? From finding out the truth too late. From being let down by a man who never wanted to acknowledge his own daughter, or from discovering something that could change you forever. Clara was already opening her laptop, typing quickly, focused. I'll pull up inheritance records. If there's a will filed or any trust registered in his name ... I can find it. Time felt frozen. Amara paced in circles, hand on her chest, feeling her heart pounding. Minutes later, Clara let out an audible breath. Amara, you need to sit down. Amara stopped in the middle of the room, her hands shaking. There's an irrevocable trust, registered under Jeremiah Langston's name, with an estimated value of over $3 million. Amara felt the floor sway beneath her. Clara continued, and the name of the beneficiary is right here, written out in full. Amara could barely breathe. The name is, Clara turned the laptop screen toward her, and there it was, Amara Sanders. She brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes full of tears. I'm Jeremiah Langston's granddaughter? Clara just nodded, emotional. He wanted to leave something for you, Amara, even without ever meeting you. Maybe as an apology. Maybe as a last chance to do the right thing. Amara stared at her own name on the screen as if looking into an unfamiliar mirror. He knew I existed ... this whole time? Yes. The answer felt like a knife between her ribs. Everything she had felt until then, abandonment, invisibility, exclusion, now mixed with a new emotion, anger. But along with it came something even stronger, power. Amara closed her eyes, let a tear fall, and whispered, He's not going to see me as a victim. If he left me this legacy, I'm going to use it to rewrite my story. Clara smiled, reserved. I'm going to handle this personally. We'll validate the will, access the funds, and figure out what else he left. But one thing is certain. Amara, you're not the same woman who walked out of Ethan's house with a suitcase in her hand. You're the heir to an empire, and no one, ever again, will treat you like nothing. Amara stood from her chair. Her posture now was completely different, but before they could celebrate anything, Clara's phone vibrated. She answered, with a furrowed brow. Hello? Yes, this is she. The pause was long. Clara's face tensed even more. Are you sure? But how? Amara stepped closer, worried. Clara hung up and looked at her gravely. It was the lawyer handling Jeremiah's estate. Apparently, there's more than one heir. Amara took a step back, shocked. What do you mean, Clara? You're not the only one. The late afternoon sun was shining through the windows of the house where it had all started and ended. Amara took a deep breath before climbing the porch steps. The same door where, just days ago, she'd walked. Out with burning eyes and a shattered heart, now stood before her like a conquered gate. She wore an elegant beige blouse, black dress pants, and low heels. Her curly hair was loose with flawless volume, and a deep wine lipstick highlighted her firm, determined mouth. She wasn't dressed in luxury. She was dressed in respect. She had come to retrieve the final documents Clara needed to complete the inheritance process. She knew it could be risky, but she also knew she was no longer the same woman who had left that house. She knocked twice. No answer. She turned the doorknob. It was unlocked. She walked in. The house was just as always, cold, silent, overly organized. The scent of polished wood and artificial flowers still filled the air. But now, everything seemed smaller, less intimidating, almost pathetic. She walked straight to the office. The folder was on the glass desk, exactly where Clara had said it would be. But before she could pick it up, she heard a voice behind her. I should have known you'd have the nerve to show up. She turned slowly. Ethan was there, leaning against the doorway, collar of his dress shirt unbuttoned, a whiskey glass in hand. His blue eyes were bloodshot, but his arrogance untouched. Nerve? She replied with a faint smile. You call it nerve, I call it a right. Ethan let out a short, venomous laugh. You still don't get it, do you? It doesn't matter how much money you think you have now. You can walk around. Like a queen, Amara, but you're still the same girl I found stocking shelves at the store. You're dust where I come from. Amara stepped closer, unbothered. She looked at him the way you look at something that no longer holds any power. And you, Ethan, you're still the same man who needs to tear others down to feel important. And who thought I'd be here begging to come back? He clenched his teeth. You know how many women would kill to be in your place, Amara? She laughed, this time openly. And you know how many would kill to escape a man like you? Ethan stepped forward. You might have a will in your hands, but that doesn't give you a name, doesn't give you status. That doesn't make you one of us. Amara stood firm. I don't want to be one of you. I want to be who I've always been, only now, with the power to choose who. I walked beside. She pulled an envelope from her purse, the bank confirmation for the trust left by Jeremiah, placed it on the table beside the whiskey glass. $3.2 million, legitimate inheritance. Transfer validated, irrevocable trust. Ethan said nothing. She stepped even closer. Now her eyes were glowing with strength. You kicked me out thinking I was nothing. But now, I have enough to buy this house and fire you from your own illusion. He stepped back, confused. You're bluffing. Want to see the purchase agreement? Clara already filed the offer, and you know what the funniest part is? She looked around. I don't even want this house. It was never a home. But just knowing you'll live afraid of losing every single wall ... that's enough. She grabbed the folder with the documents, turned gracefully. This right here, Ethan, is the sound of a door closing, for good. He shouted impulsively. You won't get away with this, Amara. You're going down. People like you always fall. But she was already at the door. Then get ready to watch, Ethan, because I'm not going to fall, I'm going to fly. When she stepped outside, the night wind gently lifted her hair. The Charlotte sky was painted in shades of purple and orange. She pressed the folder to her chest, not as someone protecting a piece of paper, but as someone protecting her own freedom. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was Clara. I need to see you. There's something you need to know about The other heir. Amara paused. Her heart, already beating strong, picked up pace. Where are we going with this now? Clara's call still echoed in Amara's mind as she pulled into the garage of her grandmother's old house. The place was dusty, but untouched, as if time had paused there, waiting for her. In the darkest corner of the room, covered by an old sheet, was the wooden trunk where her grandmother kept letters, old photos, and secrets the world never knew. She pulled the fabric back slowly, revealing the time-worn piece. The wood was cracked. In places, the latch rusted, but the carved ironwork still showed symbols Amara remembered from childhood. It was more than a piece of furniture. It was a bridge to everything she had lost. She knew she couldn't let the trunk rot. She needed to restore it, as if restoring that object was also restoring a part of herself. The next day, she drove to South Charlotte, where Clara had recommended a trusted woodworking shop. The storefront was simple, with a wooden sign, Thompson & Son, handcrafted restoration. The smell of raw wood and varnish drifted through the open door. Inside, the sound of sandpaper being worked patiently filled the room. The man working was facing away, wearing a fitted white t-shirt, strong, precise arms. When he turned around, Amara's eyes locked onto him. Malik Thompson. Tall, deep chocolate skin, well-groomed beard, dark eyes that radiated calm, and a smile that needed no rehearsing. He paused his work, wiped his hands on a cloth, and stepped forward. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Amara smiled shyly, holding the trunk's handle with both hands. "I have an old piece. It belonged to my grandmother. I want to restore it." Malik studied the trunk carefully, then looked at Amara with care. "There's history here. This isn't just old wood. She used to keep the letters she got, the ones she never replied to. And now you want to give them a voice." Amara swallowed hard. "Yes." He led her to a workbench where he placed the trunk gently, like it was sacred. He ran his hand slowly over the lid, analyzing every imperfection. "It's going to take patience. But I can do it. I can wait." Malik looked up. "You seem like the kind of woman who's waited long enough." She lowered her eyes, touched. "I've been waiting for myself. I think now I've arrived." He simply nodded, respecting the silence that followed. "You know what's the most beautiful part?" he said after a few seconds. "This latch here, it wasn't broken from use. Someone tried to force it open, but it still didn't budge. It's still intact." Amara gently touched the latch. "She used to say we have to protect what's precious, even if the world tries to break in." Malik smiled slightly. "Your grandmother was wise." She nodded, looking at the trunk, but it was as if she were looking inside herself. "She was everything. My beginning and my safe harbor." Malik grabbed a measuring tape, wrote something. "In a notebook. I can start today. It'll take about 2 weeks. But I promise, when it's done, it'll look new. Just with an old soul." Amara smiled. A small smile, but full of truth. "That's all I want." As she turned to leave, Malik called her, not arrogantly, just gently. "Your name?" "Amara. Amara Sanders." He extended his hand. "Malik Thompson." The handshake was firm, but gentle. A second longer. And they both knew. They didn't know what to call it yet, but something had begun there. When Amara left the workshop, the world felt quieter. But not empty. Quiet like something was being born. And at the back of the shop, Malik was still looking at the trunk and at the door she'd walked out of. He whispered to himself, "Amara." At that exact moment, her phone vibrated. It was Clara. The message said only, "She showed up. The other heir. We need to talk." Amara stopped on the sidewalk, feeling a chill down her spine. Clara's message still echoed in Amara's mind when the doorman of the building gently knocked on the door of the temporary apartment where she was staying. "There's a man downstairs, Miss Sanders," said. "He's your husband." Amara froze for a second. Did he say his name? Ethan Walker. "He has flowers. Want me to send him away?" She took a deep breath. Inside, something turned over, but her voice came out firm. "You can let him up. I want to look him in the eye." Minutes later, the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, there he was. Light beige suit, the same expensive cologne, and a bouquet of white flowers in his hand. The forced smile on his face gave away everything and nothing. "Amara, you look beautiful." He looked her up and down, like someone trying to reconnect with something he no longer knew how to touch. She stood still in the doorway. "May, I come in?" She stepped aside without saying a word. He walked in. The apartment was simple but tidy. A plant in the window, a modest painting on the wall, and the soft light of sunset pouring in. Ethan looked around with veiled disdain. "I heard about the inheritance. And about your grandfather. Must be a lot to take in, right?" Amara stayed silent. She simply crossed her arms. "I've been thinking a lot about everything we lived through. About how things ended. I was too harsh. I regret it." He held out the bouquet. "I wish we could have another chance." She took the flowers calmly, studied each petal, then walked to the kitchen, opened the trash can, and placed the bouquet inside with the same care someone uses to close an old book. She returned to the living room. "You regret it, Ethan?" Her voice finally broke the silence. "Losing me? Or finding out I have more than you now?" He hesitated. "Amara, I made mistakes. But everything I did was because of pressure. I was trying to keep up appearances. She cut him off. "You threw me out of my own house. Treated me like a burden. Humiliated me in front of strangers. And now you show up here with flowers and a rehearsed speech?" He tried to smile. "You know we have history. I know you like no one else does." She stepped forward. Her eyes burned, but it wasn't pain. It was clarity. "No, Ethan, you knew the version of me who accepted too little because she thought that was all she had. But that woman doesn't exist anymore." He tried to get closer, his voice now faltering. "Amara, please, I'm trying to fix this. You didn't lose a wife, Ethan. You lost the only woman who truly loved you. Even when you didn't deserve it." The words fell like a sentence. He froze as if struck by an invisible blow. She pointed to the door. "Leave. Don't come back. You had everything and threw it away." He looked at her one last time, but there was nothing left to find in her gaze. She was standing right in front of him, but already in another world, one where he had no place. When the door closed behind him, Amara took a deep breath. Her heart was racing, but not from fear. It was freedom. It was an ending. It was a beginning. Her phone rang. It was Clara again. "Answer. It's serious." Amara swiped her finger across the screen. Clara's voice came through sharp. "The other heir did show up. But there's more. She's already hired a lawyer. And she's saying you're not entitled to anything." Amara closed her eyes. Her hand tightened around the phone. She wants a fight. She wants everything. Amara didn't sleep that night. Clara's call echoed like a silent siren inside her. The other heir wants everything. But that morning, with the soft light coming through the window, she realized she no longer wanted to live just on the defensive. What she had gained wouldn't be just a reply to the past. It would be a gift to the future of other women like her. She took a sip of the strong coffee she made herself. Then she grabbed her grandmother's old notebook, opened to a blank page, and wrote at the top, Casa Raiz, Center for Women's Restoration and Empowerment. Days later, sitting beside Clara and Malik, Amara presented the project. This isn't just about me. It's about women who always had talent, strength, intelligence, but never opportunity. Clara, in a gray suit with a firm gaze, crossed her arms with pride. And where do you want to open this? In an old warehouse next to Malik's workshop. I already spoke with the owner. He's willing to sell. Malik nodded with a slight smile. He sat beside her, his calloused hands resting on his knees. That place has been empty for years. Neighbors complain, kids throw rocks at the windows. But if it becomes what you're imagining, Amara, it's going to bring life back to a lot of things. Amara smiled. I want to start with restoration, sewing and painting workshops, and later classes on entrepreneurship, finances, psychological support. I want every woman who walks through that door to feel like she belongs. You want to give back what was taken from you, Clara said, emotional. I want to give back what was never given. Weeks passed in fast motion. Amara managed renovations, chose paints, met with community leaders, received donations. Malik spent nights building furniture from scratch, wooden benches, shelves, cabinets. He made everything with his own hands, with a care no one had seen since his father passed away. His workshop became an extension of the project. Girls from the neighborhood learned from him how to handle tools, sandwood, and see beauty in something broken. One day, while Amara was taping the floor to mark the rooms, Malik appeared with a freshly finished stool. Made from the leftover. Wood from your trunk, he said, holding it out. She touched it gently. It's beautiful. You are too. The words came out fast, and by the time he realized, they were already spoken. Amara looked at him. There was a second of silence in the air, and in it, a choice. She smiled, but didn't look away. Have you always been this straightforward? Only when I know it's real. She stepped a little closer. Then show me. What else you feel? He held her waist gently, kissed her forehead, then rested her softly against his chest. They stayed like that for a long and quiet moment. Their romance blossomed with the same gentleness as everything else had begun, without rush, without games, without empty promises, only truth. On the day Casa Raiz opened, the line to get in wrapped around the block. Women of all ages, Black, Latina, single mothers, school dropouts arrived with eyes full of hope. Amara, in a flowing white dress and a brown scarf in her hair, stepped onto the improvised stage and looked at them all. For a long time, I accepted too little. But now I understand it wasn't because I lacked worth. It was because I lacked a mirror. This house is meant to be that mirror. Here, we're going to see ourselves. And no one will ever again tell us we're not enough. The applause was long. And in the crowd, Malik looked at her with sincere pride. When she stepped off the stage, he hugged her from behind and whispered, You don't know what you're building here, Amara. She held his hand and replied, Yes, I do. I'm building the place where I would have found myself, if someone had believed in me earlier. But the peace didn't last long. As she was gathering the opening day papers, Clara came running in, her face serious. We need to talk. That other heir filed an emergency motion with the court, and the judge agreed to review it immediately. Amara looked her friend in the eye. What is she claiming? That you're a fraud. And that the entire inheritance should be frozen until she can prove her blood is worth more than yours. Amara took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. The news of the legal case still hung in the air like a heavy cloud, but she knew. She couldn't let fear steal the light of that day. Casa Raiz had just been born, and no one was going to bury a dream that so many women were just beginning to reach for. The courtyard was full. Children ran between the newly painted benches. Women embraced each other with emotion, and the faces reflected something Amara was still learning to recognize: gratitude. The afternoon sun slowly fell over the newly renovated roof when Clara touched her arm. "Malik wants to speak." He asked for the mic. Said he wants to close the event with something personal. Amara furrowed her brow. "Personal?" Clara just smiled. "You'll understand." Malik stepped up the 2 steps to the small improvised stage with steady feet but a heart on his face. He wore a light blue shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and paint stains on his hands, as always. The microphone squeaked slightly. He cleared his throat. "I'm not a man of speeches. My tool has always been the hammer. But today, Today I need to speak with something else. I need to use my heart." The murmurs stopped. Everyone listened. He looked at Amara, who now stood beside the stage in a burnt orange dress, her hair down, eyes glistening. "When she came to my shop, she brought an old trunk. Cracked, crooked, weathered. I thought she wanted to restore the wood, but then I realized." He paused. "She didn't come to fix an object. She came to recover a piece of herself. And in the process, she restored something in me too." Amara brought her hand to her mouth, tears immediately forming in her eyes. "I had buried things inside, fears, losses, the feeling that it was too late to believe in love. But then you came, Amara, with that quiet courage, that gaze that sees through, that soul that carries generations of struggle and still chooses to love." The crowd was silent. Not even the birds dared to sing. "You gave me back faith. You made me want to be more, for me and for you." He stepped down calmly, stopped in front of her. He didn't kneel, didn't hold out a ring. It was something more real. "I don't want to save you. You already saved yourself. But if you'll let me, I want to walk beside you, at your pace." "Your way," Amara cried, but it wasn't pain. It felt like her soul was being held for the first time. "Will you build a new life with me? No rush, no demands, just truth." She nodded, smiling through the tears. "Yes, but only if we build it with rootwood." He laughed, pulling her into a long embrace as the crowd gave a standing ovation. And in that embrace, there was no more pain. There was rebuilding. There was love. A love that wasn't born from absence, but from presence, from listening, from exchange, from healing. Clara watched from afar. She smiled with her eyes, but the peaceful moment was interrupted by the insistent buzz of her phone. She answered, stepping a few feet away. When she heard what was being said on the other end, her expression changed. Seriousness, alarm. Amara noticed. "Clara, something happened." The lawyer quickly put her phone away. "We need to talk, now. Is it about the hearing?" Clara nodded. "The woman who filed the case, the other heir. She's not alone. We found out that behind her, there's a name, you know. And you're not going to believe who it is." Amara's face hardened. "Who?" Clara whispered carefully. "Ethan." Amara's heart stopped for a moment. He had come back. But now, from the shadows, hearing Ethan's name from Clara's mouth was like a cold blade cutting through Amara's chest. He hadn't just returned. He was operating behind the new heir, manipulating everything from the shadows. As he always had, only now, playing big. Clara ran a hand over her face, tired but steady. "He's funding her lawyers. Managed to convince the court the will may have been tampered with, and that your connection to Jeremiah needs to be reassessed. Amara didn't respond immediately. She just breathed, looking at the newly mounted sign at Casa Raiz's entrance. Her name was there, not in ink, but in existence. Then it's war, Clara nodded. And we're going to win. With evidence, with truth, with history. He may have money, but I've got a full dossier on who he really is. Days later, the hearing was scheduled. At the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, the case made local headlines. Fight over historic investor's fortune pits heirs face to face with ex-husband involved. Amara walked into the courtroom wearing a dark brown suit, her hair pulled into a low bun, and a serene expression. At her side, Clara, impeccable in black, with a folder full of documents and eyes sharp as blades. At the other end of the room sat Ethan and Danielle Rivas, the supposed other heir. Danielle was a woman in her 40s, white, elegant in posture, and with a rehearsed smile. But her eyes, cold, empty. The judge called for silence, and the battle began. Ethan and Danielle's lawyers tried to paint Amara as an opportunist, claimed Jeremiah Langston had been manipulated in his final days, that the will was signed under undue influence, and that the other granddaughter had been unjustly excluded. Clara stood up calmly. Your Honor, we have phone recordings, personal letters, and bank records that prove Mr. Langston not only knew about Amara Sanders, but made it clear, in writing, that he wanted to make amends for the wrongs he committed against the daughter he abandoned. And more? She paused strategically. We have documents linking Ethan Walker to illegal transfers from the joint account he shared with Ms. Sanders, made without her consent in the months leading up to the divorce. The courtroom erupted. In murmurs, Ethan turned pale. That's a lie, he shouted, standing up, but the judge struck the gavel. Mr. Walker, silence, Clara continued, unshaken. We have bank statements, dates, witness testimony. Ethan Walker used Amara's account as a cover to hide transactions. And now, he's trying to invalidate the only legacy she received by right of blood. The judge examined the documents. He read them carefully. And finally, the ruling came. Like music, the will remains valid. The funds are to remain under the control of the rightful heir, Amara Sanders. And proceedings will begin against Ethan Walker for asset fraud and misuse of marital funds. Amara's hand trembled slightly at the words, but she didn't celebrate. She simply closed her eyes like someone breathing after years underwater. Across the room, Danielle stood, outraged, and left without saying a word. Ethan stayed seated, frozen. Later that same day, he showed up alone at a city park. Wrinkled suit, unshaven face, hands clasped as if praying for something he already knew wouldn't come. He sat on a wooden bench facing the lake. Children played. Ducks swam. And the world moved on. He stared into nothing. No more flowers. No more power. No more illusions. The man who once kicked Amara out of her home now had no home, no name, no one. And far away, as Moloch hung a new sign on the project's building, Amara looked out at the street and whispered, now, justice has finally started. But something inside her told her this still wasn't the end. Clara was walking briskly down the sidewalk with an envelope in hand. Amara, you need to see this now. Amara held the envelope Clara had just handed her. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze stayed steady. Inside was the last letter from Jeremiah Langston, handwritten, dated a month before his death. She read it silently, and when she finished, the tears came without warning. He wanted to meet me, she murmured, but thought he didn't deserve to. Clara gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Even so, he left you everything. He Wasn't a good man. But in the end, he tried to do something right. Amara looked out the window. The morning sun lit up the Casa Raiz courtyard where the workshops were already full. Women of all ages hammered, painted, wrote. Children ran between the benches. A young woman with dreadlocks taught another how to sew a bag from recycled fabric. And in the corner of the reading room, an elderly woman read aloud a passage from Avdajaj from Astosage from Toni Morrison to a captivated group. It was a new world. And Amara had helped build every piece of it with her own hands and with the scars life had left behind. Later, she walked side by side with Malik through the halls of the house. He observed everything with calm eyes, hands in his pockets, a quiet smile on his face. "Do you feel it too?" he asked. "Feel what?" "This energy in here, like the walls are breathing." Amara smiled. "They are. They're alive with every woman who came in here believing she mattered." They stopped in front of the restoration room where a teenage girl smiled as she showed her mom a bench she had finished on her own. Malik slipped an arm around Amara's shoulders. "You built an empire." "No, Malik. I built a place where no one will ever be invisible like I was." He kissed her forehead. "And I'm proud to walk beside you." She turned to him, eyes misty. "You showed up when I was shattered. You didn't try to fix me. You just stayed until I remembered how to put myself back together. You were never broken, Amara. You were just saving the pieces to build something greater." They walked out to the garden in the back, where circle benches hosted group discussions. A black boy, about 6 years old, was drawing on the ground with crayons. When he saw Amara, he smiled and held up his drawing. A woman with a cape and crown. "That's you, Aunt Amara." She knelt down, moved. "And why am I wearing a crown?" "Because you won." She smiled. "Yeah, I guess I did." Malik held out a hand to help her up. "Want to say something to close the day?" She nodded, walked to the small platform at the center and spoke, no microphone, just her heart. "For a long time, I thought I wasn't enough. That my worth depended on how others saw me. But pain taught me something. When someone throws you away, thinking you're worthless, it's because they never knew how to recognize what's precious, but the world sees. And fate collects." Everyone applauded, but she said no more. She just smiled and stepped down from the stage in Malik's embrace. There, in the midst of everything she had built with pain, work, and love, Amara had fully bloomed. And for the first time, she chose who to share the harvest with. Never underestimate a woman who learned to bloom through pain. Because when she awakens, she transforms everything around her and chooses who gets to share the victory. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating in the comments from 0 to 10 and tell me how much Amara's journey touched you. If you liked it, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel to follow more stories. And before you go, I've picked out another moving story that will touch you even more. It's right here on the screen, waiting for you. Shall we go together?